Hi, today I'm going to build this relatively large screw organization shelf. This is another project that I'm building out of the reclaimed lumber from the workbench that I took apart in my shop. This is a relatively simple shelf made using dados. So if you'd like to see how I did it, stick around. Let's get started.
As you probably saw in the opening scene, this shelf actually has two different depths, and to make that division, I'm using some 3/4 inch scraps that are cut at 7 inches by 6 3/4 inches. And there are 3 of these pieces. And then down below in the bigger section of the boxes, there is also 7 by 6 3/4 inch shelf pieces. And then at the top there are 9 pieces of 1/4 inch plywood that are 4.5 by 6 3/4, and that is what is being cut right here. Counting everything up to make sure I have all the pieces, you can see all of the shorter pieces there that are 1/4 inch, and the pieces on the left are the 3/4, and the pieces I just set down are the 1/4 bigger shelves. And then the top of the entire unit is 4.5 by 21.5 inches. And this is 3/4 inch plywood as well. The bottom of the bin part of the shelf is also 3/4 of an inch, and that is 7 inches by 21.5 inches. And the bottom part of the shelf storage and the top of the bin is also 3/4 inch plywood, and that is 7 inches by 21.25. To make the two dividing sections of the shelves, you need 2 pieces that are 27.25 by 7 inches wide. Like I said, these are 2 identical pieces, and there is going to be a strip cut out of these later on. I'm actually showing both cuts, both pieces. Now to make the 2 side pieces, these need to be 7 inches wide and 36.25 inches long. These are going to be 2 identical pieces as well, and we are going to cut a 2.5 inch strip out of these later on in the steps. And now to cut all the dados, I am just switching out my combination blade to a few dado stack, and I'm doing this at 3/4 of an inch. And I'm setting it to 1/4 inches in depth. This is the top of the storage shelf, and the dados for this need to be 6 3/4 inches in from either side, so I just did one and flipped it over and did the other side. The piece that makes up the bottom of the bins also needs 3/4 of an inch wide dado, 1/4 inch deep, and these need to be 6 5/8 of an inch in from either end. These are the side pieces, and you need to cut out a 3/4 inch dado, 1/4 inch deep on either end, and you need to do this for both sections. And you also need a 3/4 inch wide by 1/4 inch deep dado 8 inches in from what is going to be the bottom of your shelf. Now I'm readjusting the depth of the blade to 1/8 of an inch. And then you need to grab your 2 middle pieces, and you need to make a 3/4 by 1/8 inch deep dado 11.5 inches from the bottom. And you need to do this on both sides of these pieces. I only showed it on one. And then you need to reset your dado stack to 1/4 inch dado and 1/8 deep. And then you're going to start making multiple cuts on your middle sections that are going to be 5 3/4 inches from the bottom. Readjust for 15 3/4 inches from the bottom. And again, these are on both sides. Adjust again for 19.5 inches from the bottom of your shelf. And one last time at 23.25 inches. And do this obviously for both pieces. Now you want to grab your 2 outside pieces, and we need to make dados at 14.25, 20, 24.25, and 31 3/4 inches from the bottom, and these are only on one side. And now we're going to cut off that 2.5 inch strip I was talking about. So I set the blade high, made a mark on my fence so I didn't overcut, and then I flipped the one side over and moved my fence appropriately so I could cut the middle pieces exactly the same. I readjusted and used my miter gauge to cut the side. And finish off the last little bit with a handsaw. When I started cutting the dados, I was looking at my SketchUp drawing incorrectly and made a few extra 3/4 inch cuts where I should have been making 1/4 inch. So here I am just replacing that 1/8 inch deep ply of plywood to make it aesthetically pleasing. And then on the middle sections I actually had a 3/4 inch cut where I should have had a 1/4, and I'm just filling in a 1/4 inch of it so that the shelf is nice and tight. A little bit of sanding on all the pieces before I get to painting. And I was hoping to paint pretty much everything before I assembled, and I was able to do pretty much just that, and Serafina had a good time helping me out. Now she just wants to paint when we go down in the shop, which is okay. As long as someone does my painting, I'm happy. Putting it together, I used Titebond 3 to give me a little bit more open time. I didn't know how this was going to go together, but it was a lot easier than some of the projects I've glued up. So Titebond 3 might not have been necessary, but there's no reason not to use it in this sequence, I guess. So I just used a brush to make sure I had good glue coverage everywhere. Glued the 2 middle pieces in, and then glued the outside pieces to those. Putting my bottom piece in place, and a bunch of clamps. And this is what it looks like as it is drying. Yeah, I put a few nails in, if you guys didn't notice. Now I am putting in the shelf part where it makes the change from the deep bins to the shorter bins. And it took a little bit of persuasion to get these in place. And now the 1/4 inch dividing sections of the big bins. And lastly, I put in all 9 pieces for the dividing sections of the smaller bins, and these actually slid in super easy, which makes me excited because my table saw is keeping its accuracy and cutting the back to the proper dimensions, and these are 36 1/4 by 22 1/2, and nailing it in place with some brads. Screwing on the French cleat. This is a French cleat that I cut from a previous project, and just putting it in place. And a spacer for the bottom. And now I'm actually cutting a small little piece to put at the base of the bin section just so everything doesn't fall out. Putting it on. And my thought for this is to use a bunch of Tupperware units that I had from the deck screws. And I'm just taking the stickers off, putting in the hardware that I want, and then I will, right with the permanent marker for now, I'll probably end up putting a tag on this and filling it up. I ended up having a lot more than I thought and pretty much filled up the bin.
Well, I think that worked out pretty well. As you can see, I got it pretty much filled up, and that's maybe half of the screws I have. I probably should have made this bin a little bit bigger. I might actually put some nails on the side to hold some of these boxes, but I don't know. Like a Craig screws, I'm gonna have to end up putting them in a box like this, or even probably a bigger box since I have a little bit of room for that. So anyway, that's going to help organize the shop quite a bit. I'm definitely glad I went with the dados on this one. I wish I did this on the storage bin organization shelf. This went together a lot easier. I had a couple little boo-boos where I was getting excited cutting the dados, but if I straightened it out pretty well. I put some slips in there to tighten everything up again. So it worked out pretty well. I'm going to have a free set of plans for this on my website, DIYtyler.com, if any of you are interested in building it. If any of you guys have any questions or comments about it, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel, we put out a new video pretty much every week, so I'd love to have you subscribe so you can see what we put out. I'm Tyler. I like to do it myself, and we will see you next time.